The weakness of the South African economy is very well documented by now. The economy actually surprised us by contracting. We knew it was going to be weak, but it actually turned out negative in the second quarter of the year. And growth, we think, overall is going to be around 1 to 1.5% over the next 2 to 3 years. However, what that hides is the fact that we're not in this alone. In other words, it's not just us. Over the same period, when our economy contracted, we actually saw significantly deeper contractions in economies such as Brazil, Russia, Singapore, and Taiwan, and recessions in advanced economies like Canada. And to my mind, the characteristic that's shared by these economies is the fact that they have some sort of exposure to China, either via the commodity price link or via the manufacturing channel. So I think the key risk going forward for these economies is to the extent that China weakens further, which leads to another leg down in commodity prices, then we could see these economies undergoing further pain. But I think we may now be in a period where commodity prices have stabilized. That's been the case for the last, I'd say, 3 to 4 months. And it seems that the Chinese economy, after decelerating quite significantly over the last 2 years, is actually beginning to stabilize at a still robust but lower level of growth than what we've seen in the past. So if you look at the South African economy, the reason why growth of the overall economy is weak is because we're seeing domestic spending from both households and government moderating, and the production and export side of the economy hasn't fully compensated for that until very recently. So I think the one positive is that we are starting to find nascent evidence of the weak rand doing what it's supposed to be doing in terms of boosting the export side of the economy. We actually saw very robust growth in export revenues and volumes over the first half of this year. And in fact, in the second quarter of the year, our trade balance, which is the difference between exports and imports, actually went into surplus for the first time since 2011. So I think the export side of the economy is finally starting to provide compensation for the weak domestic spending picture, which is actually healthy, because if you've been an economy that's living beyond its means, you want to shift away from spending too much towards producing and exporting. I think that the business model of digging things out the ground and shipping them off to China is probably over, at least over the next 5 years or even more. And part of the reason for that is that the Chinese economy itself is transitioning from one that requires an extensive amount of commodities in order to beneficiate into manufactured products to sell to the rest of the world. China itself is slowly transitioning into a consumer and services economy, at least greater market share for those two parts of the economy. And so to the extent that commodity prices are going to be stable at low levels or even decline further, and the Chinese economy is not going to be hoovering up commodities, we think that commodity exporters all over the world, but particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Africa itself, we need to diversify our production and our export basket. I mean, and we do that via industrialization and boosting the manufacturing sector. And this has many benefits. Firstly, it makes our macroeconomy less volatile and less susceptible to the vagaries of commodity prices. And secondly, manufacturing has very deep forward and backward linkages with other sectors of the economy because it acts as a demand for raw materials for beneficiation. So your commodities actually, from being over-reliant on foreign customers, actually rely on domestic customers, and it also provides demand for services sectors of the economy. So the key constraints to this industrialization process is obviously supply side factors. And those are things that make it easy for people to produce, or entrepreneurs to produce goods within the economy. So things like power, logistics, and also non-physical infrastructure like the regulatory environment and the national labor dispensation. I think the focus has been on that. I think we need to increase the focus on those supply side factors that hold back industrialization even more, but also just action and delivering some of these supply side reforms. We have no choice but to do it now.